Welcome to the Path Monk Presents podcast. My name is Sean Donnelly Lewis, and I'm really excited about our episode today. Today, we're speaking with Mary Brodie. She's the founder of Gearmark.com. Mary, how's it going?
Wonderful. Thank you, Sean. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, no. So we were talking earlier. It sounds like you're surviving Texas in 2021.
Yes.
All right. Great.
Yes,
Great that you're here. Gearmark.com. Tell us all about it.
Okay, so Gearmark, what I work on is helping companies have better conversations with their customers and have more meaningful experiences. And so to me, experiences and conversations go hand in hand, because, it could be a click, it could be a video, it could be like a podcast, right? And at the end of the day, it's a conversation. There's some sort of interaction, even if it's a podcast you're listening, but you clicked on it to listen, right? So there's always some type of engagement. So you get to know, what do people like? What do they do? And then you can give them what they're looking for, and they can get, you can build some type of relationship. Because at the end of the day, I think, yes, companies is about revenue and money and leads and all of that. I work on lead gen programs quite often, and like websites and how they have to drive traffic. But, the relationship, we don't talk about that very often. And I think that's so important. And that's where the conversations come in handy, right? Because then you can build that relationship and build that engagement and get like the advocacy and that connection later. So you can have someone like they become like working for you, like your own salesperson, right? And that's what I work on with a lot of companies. So I might work in the area more of maybe awareness. In one case, it's building the product, but making sure we have those hooks out there to like help someone try it, right? And actually get engaged with the product. Or even awareness in new areas of products, like cannabinoids or something like that, where there isn't a lot really out there. So it's like the early days of SEO, like, oh my God, it's brand new.
So this sounds like the work that you do is very broad. Talk about your clientele for a second, because I'm assuming that you're not just big companies with over 500 coworkers, employees. You're also doing mom and pop around the street that are trying to pivot in a Corona world, right?
Yeah, so I work mainly with either before it was mainly the Fortune 500s or startups. I know that sounds like, and at first people are like, well, how do they relate, right? But at this point, it's more of a, I'd say a mid-sized company in startups. And I'd say what kind of connects them is this whole idea of new programs, right? So for some of them, a content strategy and or conversation strategy might be a very new program, right? Because they're just starting one. Or in some cases, it's not valued. So in some more established companies, they'll see lead gen. They go, well, we need the lead. And it's like, yeah, but you need to have a conversation to get to the lead. So how do we build that awareness and get those conversations started and get people engaged so we can get to that lead and, build that funnel and make it broader.
And thinking about Gearmark.com, how have you been able to grow the company? What has it been? A lot of outbound, inbound? How have you been able to grow?
So a lot of it, this is going to sound probably a little odd, but it's been social media and word of mouth. That's how I've tended to work things, is kind of building. I know Gearmark at one point was intertwined with Mary Brodie, which was not the best idea. But when you're a single person, you're looking to grow, right? That's when I realized, like, I can't grow if everyone thinks Gearmark is Mary Brodie, Mary Brodie's Gearmark.
Yeah.
So I had a brand issue, and it took some time to separate it. And now I think it's at the point that I can separate it more. And if I brought in more people, because I've had areas where I've had teams, like development teams or teams working on different marketing programs. So it grows, it expands and contracts. Right now I'm on the smaller side, but that's where like I do try to keep the brands of me and Gearmark a little disconnected.
Makes sense. Yeah. So with Gearmark, does the website play a role in acquiring new clients at all?
Actually, it does, because I think that's where people go to figure out who is Gearmark, what does Mary really do? So they'll hear what I do, but I think sometimes they need a little more assistance and advice. So that's where Gearmark will talk about more of the products, the projects I work on, and the approaches that I take. And it'll also refer to the book I wrote, which kind of complements everything with building relationships. And that's really like, if you focus on that in your business, the revenue will follow. right? And that's actually taken from my area too. Like what I've done with my business is if you build strong customer relationships, then people they will want to work with you because they see the value that you offer, and you build that trust, you build the loyalty. And once they're more engaged with you and they understand what to expect, right? The accountability, the transparency. And that's what I try to help my clients do.
Yeah. So you're talking about the website, talking about the content being really great and keeping people interested in what you're doing. Usually when I have CEOs or marketeers on the show, the list of the website, the strengths are really short and the room for improvement is really long. If you were to be critical for a second, what would you say you would hope you'd want to improve with the website? Would it be the ability to convert the visitors, the quality of leads generated, or the user experience?
I would say this is where the cobbler sometimes doesn't give their shoes to the children or their own shoes. So I try to keep up on it. I know I've been building out more. I think there needs to be a tighter connection between the work that I'm doing with relationships.com, which is the book site, which has all these like course materials, right? Like it has videos galore and has workbooks for the book, but that's not really connected with Gearmark. And they're connected, and it gets back to, and I think this is a struggle like with every company, because I see it no matter where I go. How do the brands connect and relate? Or is there a relationship? And I think it's getting to the point that Gearmark needs a little more interaction with revenue or relationships, because a lot of the content there really does, it's what I work on. And it's a lot of the methodologies I use when I go in to work with clients.
And coming back to the service that you offer, just for everyone listening, what would you say separates you from other people that do the same thing in the same space? What do you guys do a little bit differently?
When I go into it, I get into the emotions of the customers, and I really want to get into their emotional mindset and where they're at and how do you help them convert. So for example, with the cannabinoids, I was thinking about how do you get, let's say, a product manager or a brand manager who's in a large consumer product company to include a cannabinoid ingredient in their product. And so like, how are they feeling about this? And I'm like, wow, can you imagine? Like, it's innovative, it's interesting, but it's also a little controversial, right?
Right.
And a company like an Estee Lauder, or let's say another like P&G, right? They're not controversial.
Yeah.
So how do you do this, right? How do you accomplish this, and how do you connect in with them? And I have to say, it took a little while to figure out like, where's that sweet spot? Like what conversation is going to connect with them? And when I found that, I know I have to work more with them to get that conversation built out more. Right now, they're doing more awareness about cannabinoids and what they can do. And what value they bring. But once we have to also connect that story. So someone from one of those larger companies, like, or Palmolive, Colgate, right? They're not controversial, right? How do they see that this is actually going to help them achieve their goals?
Very cool.
Yeah. And so that's where, like, I'm working with an IT company. It's the same thing. How do we, in their case, they don't have the staff to build content. So we need to get social media connection. So what other content sources out there will make them look like the expert, connect to their audience and give them more street cred, right?
Okay.
And build awareness out there. And honestly, it's been working. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so thinking about your expertise in the area of growth, thinking about the fact that you're a founder of a company and you're around other companies that are, like you said, you do in startups, companies that are just ramping up. I'd just love to pick your brain for a second on growth. When I say a word like innovation, what would you say would be the biggest challenge for a company to innovate, but also grow at the same time?
It's connecting to your customer, right? Or who is the customer, right? Because if you have an innovation, you might be taking along your existing customers, or it might be a new customer, right? And how do you build that community to keep them involved? And I think that's the hardest hurdle for any startup, is to build that community. So like a large company, they have this large community, and if they have a new product line, they probably scoped out who these people are going to want to use the product, right? So that's a little easier because they're already bought in. So they're like, okay, we'll give it a shot, right?
Right.
You have no trust with these people. You're a startup. You're out of the blue. People are like, who the heck are you, right? So how you have not a lot of credibility, not a lot of trust going on, right? Not a lot of accountability because you're new, like you just produced a product, but what has it done, right? So how do you build that community? And that, I think, is the biggest hurdle for innovation, is getting someone to use it. Because it's like the tree in the forest. I overuse that analogy all the time, right? Trees falls in the forest and no one's there. Did it fall? What happened? Like, it's the same with innovation. You can have an innovation if no one knows about it. Doesn't matter, right?
Sure. And
And I
then
think
keeping the same thought going, when you see a company growing and they're worried about ROI, what do you think is the biggest challenge for ROI with growth?
oh, that's a great question. It really does go back to that customer and that connection. And it's hard to get that return. You're going to have like the high lead costs, right? If you start having some type of innovation and you start promoting it out there, your lead costs are going to be ridiculous because you can't have to connect with someone somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you bring them in, and how do you start making, and then when you get into the production side of it, right? If we want to look at that end, right? You have to have people who are a team working together really well. So this is also a challenge for a startup, is everybody getting along? And then you get into the whole culture issue. And what does culture mean? I always see business as about the people. I keep coming back to that as my bottom line on everything. Like, if things aren't working, it's because of the people. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, that doesn't sound like I wonder how is that received when you say something like that?
At first, not very well.
Yeah.
But people do, I have to say, executives do kind of understand where I'm going with it. Like, if we're not getting along and we're stumbling over each other, that's waste, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is waste. And because we're not achieving our goal, because we're not all directed, right? Like, we talk about like herding cats and trying to get your cats in the box, right? Again, overused expression, but it's somewhat accurate. If you have everyone just running around and they're not aligned, how, and I used to see this actually in my career. I spent some time at HP and Hewlett Packard Enterprises, and the company, when it was HP, it was so big, right? It's like had 300,000 people, and it would be hard to get anything done because you had to have everyone aligned. But if you had everyone aligned, you have no idea. Things moved really fast. Everyone agreed. The power of what could be achieved and everyone's aligned was phenomenal. But if someone didn't agree, and you didn't know why, like, this is why I also go to the whole emotions. Like, you have to understand your customer and their emotions. Someone doesn't agree and you don't know why, your whole thing just blows up. And I used to watch projects blow up.
That reminds me of, I think, even 5 years ago, right? In the business world, it was all about synergy, right? That was the thing, of no sideways energy, stuff like that. So, I mean, I think it's just such a fast moving world that we live in, that a truth like that, where it's like, okay, that's still true, but now people want like a truer truth, right? But going back to something like that, like, okay, there's a reason that it was such a big deal and everybody had synergy on the tip of their tongues. It's because there's truth to it, right? When you're wasting energy, when you have conflicts between people, or even you thinking about working with a company, if there's not a good feel or vibe, then
Exactly.
then it doesn't work as well as it should. It makes sense.
Yeah, and it even goes to it even goes to customers too, because now customers are in your business, right? They're literally in there with you. So if they're not with you, right, and they have their own theirs, like, right, it's going to be hard to connect with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just want to switch gears here for a second and talk about you as a leader. What kind of content do you consume to educate yourself and grow as a person and as a professional?
That's interesting. So I know I do read, now I read a lot more about neuroscience and like neurobiology and like how emotions are formed and how they're built and how they're constructed, like all of that, right? Anything that has to do with the brain and emotions. I also will read a lot about writing, like what makes great writing, what makes good writing, different like different things about customers and how to connect with them. Harvard Business Review. I have certain favorite articles that are over there. And also, I think what's in the past few years, one of the things I've been getting more knowledgeable about, and I think that has actually changed a lot of my career path too, is human rights and justice, believe it or not. I know that might sound odd, but even how you have empathy or compassion, and I prefer to use the word compassion for your customer and how they can overcome their problem. Understanding more, I think human rights and justice, it broadens your view a lot more, because then you see more of the situation of your customer and other challenges they might be having, and how can you help them? How does your product solve a problem to help them overcome that?
Awesome. So we are slowly coming to the end of the episode, but before we end, I just want to throw you into our rapid fire section. So I just ask you some questions, short and sweet, and you answer them as honestly as possible. How's that sound?
Okay. Let's see how this goes.
Okay. Mary, what's the last book that you read?
Oh, I can't remember the name of the title, but it was about neuroscience, and of course the author's name escaped me. But I'm seeing this like book of a brain, and it was all pretty colors. Another one that I read, again, I don't remember the titles because they were all about neuroscience, and I don't remember the authors. I'd have to go get my tablet to get the names. But
all right. Well, we're in rapid fire, so we're just
okay.
going to truck on. What's the single thing that your company is focused on at the moment the most?
I'm going to say building better conversations with customers that's more engaging and emotionally aware, builds compassion between companies and customers so they can solve their problems.
If there were no boundaries in technology, no boundaries at all, what would be the one thing you want to have fixed for your company today?
Oh, that's a hard one. I've never thought about this before. You know, what I would love to do, and it's something I've really wanted to do, but I think we don't have the technology for, is to develop like an AI that can collaborate. This is something, because I see there's different types of conversations, and you need to have a lot of like compassion and emotional connection to be able to collaborate with someone, because you have to trust them and trust their views. And if there was a way that you could create an AI that you could collaborate with and give you a different perspective.
Very interesting. That's Mary Brodie. You can check out all the work that she's doing at gearmark.com. Mary, thank you so much for being on the show today. The last thing on the show is the last word. So if someone forgets everything that we talked about today, maybe you just want to sum it up for them, or if there's something that you feel like we didn't cover, I just want to give you the last word. The floor is yours.
Always be sure to emotionally connect with your customers through conversations and have compassion for them.
Thanks for being on the show today, Mary.
Thanks so much, Sean. It was great to be here. Thank you.